In 1954, the average American kitchen contained 11 appliances. By 1964, that number had doubled. By 1974, it had doubled again. Most of the machines introduced during those decades promised the same thing: more time. What they delivered was something else entirely. The shift began with small changes. A mixer replaced a wooden spoon. A blender replaced a knife and cutting board. An electric can opener replaced the manual version that had worked perfectly well for generations. Each replacement was marketed as progress. Each one was adopted without much discussion. The pattern was consistent. Identify a task that required physical effort or time, then introduce a machine that removed both. These weren't luxuries, they were positioned as necessities. Advertisements didn't suggest that life might be easier with these devices. They implied that life without them was inefficient, outdated, backward. The message was rarely stated directly, but it was understood. To resist these changes was to resist modernity itself. The machines arrived in waves. First came the large appliances: refrigerators, freezers, electric stoves. These fundamentally altered how food was stored and prepared. Then came the smaller devices: toasters, coffee makers, food processors. Finally came the specialized tools: electric knives, egg cookers, hot dog steamers. Devices designed to perform single tasks that human hands had managed for thousands of years. Most people didn't question it. The devices were affordable, or at least attainable through credit. They were widely available. Neighbors had them. Advertisements showed them. Magazine articles explained how to use them. The adoption felt natural because it was everywhere at once. What made this shift particularly effective was its gradual nature. No single appliance transformed the kitchen overnight. Each addition seemed minor: a bread maker, a rice cooker, a slow cooker that eliminated the need to monitor a stove. Individually, these changes appeared insignificant. Collectively, they represented a complete reorganization of domestic life. The redesign extended beyond the devices themselves. Kitchens were rebuilt to accommodate them. Counter space was allocated. Electrical outlets multiplied. Storage was reconfigured. The physical space of food preparation was engineered around machines, not around the people using them. This wasn't discussed openly. There were no public debates about whether automating every aspect of food preparation might have unintended consequences. There were no studies examining what might be lost when physical engagement with food was systematically reduced. The conversation focused entirely on efficiency and convenience, as if those were the only metrics that mattered. The pattern became self-reinforcing. As more households adopted these appliances, expectations shifted. What was once considered helpful became expected. What was once optional became standard. To prepare food without these devices wasn't seen as a choice. It was seen as a hardship, or worse, as a failure to provide adequately for one's family. Children growing up in these kitchens learned a different relationship with food. They learned that preparation required machines. They learned that cooking meant pressing buttons and setting timers. They learned that the distance between raw ingredients and finished meals was filled with plastic, metal, and electrical current. The skills that had been passed down through generations began to fade. Kneading dough by hand became unnecessary when a machine could do it faster. Chopping vegetables became inefficient when a food processor could achieve the same result in seconds. Stirring a pot became obsolete when slow cookers eliminated the need for monitoring. Each skill that disappeared was replaced by the knowledge of which button to press. The real impact appeared years later, not in the form of a single dramatic change, but in the accumulation of small absences. The loss of tactile knowledge, the reduction of physical engagement, the erosion of the sensory feedback that comes from touching, smelling, and manipulating food directly. By the time these patterns became visible, they were already deeply embedded. The appliances weren't just in kitchens, they were in the assumptions about what cooking meant, what effort was reasonable, what role human hands should play in preparing food. The machines had become so normalized that their presence felt inevitable, their use unquestionable. This wasn't about laziness. It wasn't about people choosing convenience over quality. It was about a systematic reshaping of domestic space and practice that happened without informed consent, without full understanding of what was being traded away. The industry that produced these appliances didn't hide its intentions. Marketing materials were explicit about the goal: remove the labor from domestic work, eliminate the physical demands, free women in particular from the burden of manual food preparation. The language was progressive. The outcome was more complex. What was framed as liberation often functioned as replacement. The time saved by machines wasn't necessarily reclaimed for more meaningful activity. It was often filled with other forms of consumption. The physical engagement that was eliminated wasn't just effort, it was also connection, learning, and embodied knowledge. The appliances changed more than how food was prepared. They changed who prepared it. As machines took over more tasks, cooking became less about skill and more about equipment. Those without access to the right devices were at a disadvantage. Those with access could prepare meals with minimal knowledge of ingredients, techniques, or processes. This created a particular kind of dependency, not just on the appliances themselves, but on the entire system that produced them, marketed them, repaired them, and eventually replaced them. A kitchen filled with specialized devices required ongoing investment, ongoing updates, ongoing participation in consumer culture. The environmental cost wasn't calculated. The energy consumption of running multiple appliances simultaneously, the resources required to manufacture, ship, and eventually dispose of devices that often lasted less than a decade, the waste generated when a single component failed and rendered an entire machine unusable. These externalities were invisible at the point of purchase. The pattern extended beyond individual households. As home appliances became standard, industrial food production adapted to match. Ingredients were processed, pre-cut, pre-seasoned, packaged in forms designed to work with the machines people now owned. The food system and the appliance industry evolved together, each reinforcing the other's expansion. Schools stopped teaching many traditional cooking skills. Home economics courses focused on using appliances rather than developing technique. The assumption was that students would have access to these machines, that they would need to know how to operate them, that manual methods were obsolete and not worth learning. Cookbooks changed. Recipes assumed the presence of specific devices. Instructions were simplified to accommodate machine use. The detailed explanations of why certain techniques worked, what to look for, how to adjust based on sensory feedback, these were often eliminated in favor of precise timing and temperature settings. The cumulative effect was a generation raised with a fundamentally different understanding of food preparation. Not wrong necessarily, but significantly altered. The physical literacy that came from repeated manual work was replaced by mechanical literacy. The improvisational skill that developed from direct engagement was replaced by following automated sequences. This wasn't inevitable. Other approaches were possible. Some cultures maintained manual food preparation even as appliances became available. Some communities resisted the full automation of their kitchens. But in the United States, the adoption was nearly universal, the transformation nearly complete. The speed of the change was remarkable. Within a single generation, kitchens were utterly transformed. Within 2 generations, the previous way of preparing food had become almost unrecognizable. The continuity of domestic practice that had persisted for centuries was severed in a matter of decades. What made this particularly effective was that it didn't feel like a loss. It felt like progress. It felt like modernization. It felt like the natural evolution of domestic life. The idea that something valuable might be disappearing wasn't part of the conversation because value was measured entirely in terms of time saved and effort reduced. The appliances themselves weren't neutral tools. They were designed with specific assumptions about how food should be prepared, how quickly, with what level of engagement. Using them meant accepting those assumptions. Not using them meant fighting against the entire structure of modern kitchen design and food marketing. By the 1980s, the transformation was essentially complete. A kitchen without a full array of electric appliances was considered incomplete. Food preparation without mechanical assistance was considered unnecessarily difficult. The idea that there might be value in the slower, more physically engaged methods was rarely entertained, and when it was framed as nostalgia rather than legitimate alternative. The pattern didn't stop with cooking appliances. It extended to every aspect of food-related work. Electric dishwashers removed the last major manual task from kitchen cleanup. Garbage disposals eliminated the need to handle food waste directly. Refrigerators with ice makers, water dispensers, and digital temperature controls added layers of automation to food storage. Each innovation was presented in isolation, as if it existed independently of all the others. But together, they formed a comprehensive system, a system that consistently moved in one direction, away from direct physical engagement toward mechanical mediation. The consequences weren't immediate or obvious. They appeared gradually in the accumulated absence of certain skills, certain knowledge, certain physical capabilities. In the widening gap between those who still knew how to prepare food manually and those who had never learned because machines had always been available. This was structural. It was designed into housing developments where kitchens came pre-fitted for specific appliances. It was embedded in building codes that required certain electrical capacity. It was reinforced through retail spaces where appliances occupied more shelf space than basic cooking tools. It was normalized through media representations, where modern kitchens were defined by their equipment, not by the skills of the people using them. The system benefited from its own momentum. Each generation of appliances created the conditions for the next. As manual skills declined, the need for machines increased. As machines became more sophisticated, the skills required to use them replaced the skills they were designed to eliminate. The cycle was self-perpetuating. And this wasn't the only pattern. Similar transformations were happening simultaneously in other areas of domestic life. The same logic that automated food preparation was being applied to cleaning, to entertainment, to communication, to nearly every aspect of daily existence. Each change followed the same trajectory. Each one promised liberation and delivered dependency. Each one reshaped human capability in ways that wouldn't be fully understood for decades.